22 years. I've worked in the states of California, the state of Idaho, and the state of Oregon. I have a very strong personal conviction to not over-regulate the construction industry, to apply appropriate regulation so that the industry can flourish. Building codes promote safe housing and good housing stock for a community. And it also provides a level playing field for the construction industry. Now this one's kind of this is funny in a sense, but the oldest known building code was the Hammurabi Code, which was during the Babylon time, which talked about construction. And you know, a couple of the things that came from that code, as you can read, is if a builder has built a house and the house has flaws that cause the death of an owner, the builder shall be put to death. Now, I told you I didn't believe in over-regulating. I think that was over-regulating. One of the things, though, that you read is one that was common in the United States and probably common in Japan is the last one, and that is, if he has caused the loss of goods and shall render back whatever he has destroyed at his own cost. That's what we do today. As you know, that is more of a civil code than a building code. The building code is very technical in its nature of how to actually design buildings. Basically, back in the 1800s of the United States, back in the late 1800s, there was a lot of wood construction at the time, but no fire separation between buildings. And entire towns would burn down because of the type of lighting that they were using, like candle lighting. It would knock over and entire towns would burn down. Here in Oregon, even Astoria itself, a town up on the coast, had burnt down more than 2 times because of the lack of building codes. And so a lot of different communities started to develop their own building codes in the late 1800s, early 1900s to try to make their community safer. And so what happened, though, is the insurance industry, back in the early 1900s, finally asked for uniform codes so that there would be a uniform way to handle safe structures in regions because of the lack of consistency from town to town. So what sprung up is, as the 1920s came, model codes developed in the United States, and there was 3 model codes. One model code for the southern part of the United States, one model code for the eastern and Midwest part of the United States, and a building code for the west part of the United States, is where we are, everything west of the Mississippi. These building codes were regional in their nature, but as the world started to change and architects and engineers began to work in other regions of the United States, in the early 1990s, there was a demand by the Architects Association and by the Engineers Association to create one model code from the 3 model codes. This one model code, as used in Japan even to this day, is the International Code Conference. And that is not a government, it's not formed by the government. It's a non-profit organization that develops a code based upon a consensus process. So what happens with all those codes is it goes through an 18-month process to change it. It's a governmental consensus process, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's open hearing. So even though government officials are the final vote on the code changes, industry is involved in all of the code changes as far as they can submit code changes and testify. What's good about that is the reason government officials are the final vote is because we would not have a stake in the code change. What's good about the process is that it allows industry to be part of it. It allows experts from the industry to submit code changes and testify, architects, engineers, companies that have products, so that the right decision can be made. So the way that the process works is that industry or building officials or, can submit a code change. And once that code change is submitted, it is forwarded to the codes committee, which is made up of at least 2/3 government official, 1/3 industry. And then what that does, then the committee has a hearing, which anyone can come to, and has discussion regarding the submitted code change, pro or con or against. Yeah, which allows for testimony and debate, so that the committee then will decide if the code change has merit and is forwarded to the public hearing, or to the final hearing. Every code that is forwarded from that committee then is published with the testimonies, so that people that did not attend the committee hearing can review the merits of the code change. The International Building Code is used throughout the United States, sometimes adopted locally by governments, other times adopted statewide by governments. Before this statute, which was passed by the legislation, a jurisdiction could adopt its own code of whatever year it was developed. At the time this was adopted, there was a uniform building code, not an ICC code, but different jurisdictions adopted different years. And so there was inconsistency on what code, but there was also inconsistency on how they interpreted it. So now the state of Oregon adopts this code and allows it to be amended for the state. So we have the international code cycle that I talked about, and then once adopted in the state of Oregon, it has its own code change process to that base code. And the purpose for that is to make sure it's consistent from town to town, so that when a builder builds in Portland and Salem, the building codes are the same. Also, what the state did, once the state took on the control of the building code, and again, you've explained that they delegate the authority to the local jurisdiction, they've also required certain experience and testing for inspectors and plans examiners. So then they require also continued education every year.
So the license is renewed every year?
Well, the license is renewed every 3 years, but every year there's required continued education, so that the inspectors and plans examiners stay up on the code and the change of technology. So not just anyone can be a plans examiner or inspector. It requires a minimum of 2 years. It used to be 4 years, but now it's only 2, but the testing is required, and the tests are 4-hour tests on the building code. So as a building official for the city of Salem, I expect more experience than 2 years to hire. And I look for construction experience, so that people understand construction, not just the building code. We train our structural and mechanical inspectors to make sure that they understand that they listen to and allow debate in the field, to rely on the experts to be able to explain their position before they either turn someone down or ask them to correct something. Our inspectors are also instructed that they are part of a team, and the team is the design team, and includes the design team, the architect, the engineer, the builder, the owner. And so The inspector is to go out and respect and be courteous to the builders and understand that they need to keep their project running. If an inspector is not professional, is rude, disrespectful, the inspector is disciplined by us, by the department. The city of Salem believes that we should be accountable to the stakeholders and to the citizens, and that we believe that we should have a predictable process, a process that is predictable to the builder, predictable to the owners, so that they are being served. And I don't believe that a building department is a bunch of police officers. We do regulate, but our job is to basically inspect for compliance with the code.